Hello, everyone. Before we start, take a second to subscribe to the channel and like this episode because it really helps us reach more English learners who need calm, real conversations like this.
Yes, thank you for being here with us today. We know your time matters, and we appreciate that you chose to spend a part of your day listening and practicing English with us.
Today's topic is how to enjoy speaking English instead of fearing it.
I like how you said that, because there really is this quiet fear that many English learners carry, and sometimes they don't even fully understand where it comes from. It shows up when someone tries to speak and suddenly their heart starts beating faster, or their voice sounds small, and they feel like everyone is watching them, even if nobody actually is.
That's the funny part. When we speak a second language, we imagine the whole world is judging our grammar, our pronunciation, our speed, our accent. But here's the thing. Most people don't care about those things. They're just listening to understand you and to connect with you.
Right, but fear doesn't care about logic. Fear is emotional. It feels real even when the situation isn't dangerous. And in language learning, that fear often comes from embarrassment. Learners don't want to sound stupid or childish or incorrect, so they freeze or avoid speaking completely.
Let's pause for a moment and explain a few words that are important here, because learners hear them all the time. Embarrassed means you feel uncomfortable because you think you did something wrong or awkward. For example, if you say a word incorrectly and people laugh, you might feel embarrassed.
Awkward means a situation feels strange or uncomfortable, like you don't know what to do or say. For example, if someone asks you a question in English and you don't know how to answer, you might feel awkward for a second.
And nervous means your body feels tense because you're worried about something. A lot of learners feel nervous before speaking English to strangers, or in class, or in meetings.
Now here's a phrase learners can use to talk about this fear. I get nervous when I speak English because I'm afraid of making mistakes. Another useful phrase. Sometimes I freeze because I don't know the right words.
Those are great because they give learners a way to describe how they feel instead of hiding it. And when you can name what you're feeling, it often becomes less scary.
Let's make this real with a story. When I was learning French, I had this moment in a bakery in Paris. I wanted to buy bread, and I had practiced the sentence so many times, but when it was my turn, my brain suddenly stopped working. I knew the sentence. I had literally practiced it for days. But when the lady looked at me and asked what I wanted, everything disappeared from my brain, like someone deleted the file.
Oh no! What did you do?
I just pointed at the bread like a quiet little mouse and said the most basic thing ever, like, bread please, and then paid and got out of there as fast as I could. It wasn't dangerous, but it felt intense, like my heart was racing.
That's the thing. Language fear rarely comes from real danger. It comes from imagined judgment. And it's not only with beginners. Even intermediate learners feel it, especially when they're speaking with native speakers or in formal situations.
I want to give learners a vocabulary phrase for this. When you freeze, it means your brain stops working for a moment and you can't speak. This can happen when someone asks a question too quickly or when you're afraid of making a mistake.
Here's a question for listeners. Have you ever frozen while speaking English, even though you knew what to say?
If you answered yes, you are extremely normal. And I'll add a second question. Do you avoid speaking English because you don't want to feel embarrassed?
Many learners do. I once had a student who refused to order food in English, even though she lived in a country where English was everywhere. She told me she would rather point at the menu or use her fingers to show numbers than speak. She said speaking made her feel like she was 5 years old.
And that's powerful because it shows how emotional speaking can be. It's not just skill, it's identity. When you speak a second language, you suddenly lose the confident version of yourself. You become a simpler version, and that's uncomfortable.
But simple doesn't mean stupid, and that distinction matters. A child speaks in simple sentences, but nobody thinks children are stupid. They're just learning. Adults forget that they're allowed to be beginners in something.
Here's a phrase learners can use to talk about this situation. I feel shy when I speak English because I can't express everything I want to say. Another one. I know the idea in my head, but I can't say it with the same confidence.
These phrases give learners power because they allow them to express their inner experience instead of hiding it.
And one more vocabulary point. Shy means you don't feel comfortable speaking or expressing yourself because you worry what others might think.
Before we close this segment, I want to ask a final reflection question to listeners. What part of speaking English feels the hardest for you? Pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar, or confidence?
Think about it honestly. And remember, fear doesn't mean you're bad at English. Fear means you care about how you sound, and that's actually a sign of ambition.
So now that we opened the door and talked about fear, let's go a little deeper into where that fear comes from. Because fear doesn't appear out of thin air. Most of it comes from pressure, especially the pressure to sound perfect. And I think a lot of English learners don't realize how heavy that pressure actually feels until someone asks them to speak in front of others.
There's this strange belief that you must speak perfectly before you're allowed to speak at all, which makes no sense if you think about how children learn languages. Children speak all the time. They make constant mistakes. They invent words. They say things in funny ways, and the adults around them just keep listening and responding because communication matters more than accuracy. But adults forget this and start thinking that native-level grammar and pronunciation must magically appear before their mouth can even open.
And that perfection pressure shows up in really specific ways. For example, a learner might say a sentence and then immediately apologize for it, like, sorry, my grammar is bad, or sorry for my accent, or sorry, I'm slow. It's as if they're saying, let me speak, but let me also apologize for existing at the same time. That breaks my heart a little bit, because language should be a living thing, not a performance on a stage.
Let me tell you a quick story that will make learners smile, but also relate. Years ago, I was in Madrid trying to speak Spanish, and I had studied a lot, like really studied. I knew the vocabulary and the verbs and the basic grammar structures, but the moment I tried talking to a cashier in a supermarket, my brain suddenly felt like a washing machine. Everything was moving, but nothing was coming out in the right order. So instead of saying, I need a bag, I accidentally said, I am a bag. And the cashier just paused, looked at me, and then started laughing in the friendliest way. And I laughed too, because what else are you going to do when you accidentally declare that you are a plastic shopping bag?
Wait, that is hilarious. What did the cashier do after that?
She corrected me gently, gave me the bag, and we both kept laughing. And here's the interesting part. That moment wasn't painful. It was actually kind of joyful. I made a mistake, but I didn't die. Nobody yelled at me, and the world continued turning. In fact, that moment helped my confidence because I survived embarrassment and realized it wasn't as dangerous as my fear made it seem.
This is such a good example for learners because fear often tells you that people will judge you or laugh at you in a mean way or think you're stupid. But in reality, most people actually find language mistakes charming, funny, or brave. They know you're trying, they know it's not your first language, and they often appreciate the effort.
Let's give learners a few helpful phrases they can imitate when they talk about perfection pressure. They can say, I worry about making mistakes when I speak. Or, sometimes I want to speak, but I'm afraid people will judge me. And one more. I know my grammar isn't perfect yet, but I'm trying.
That last one is powerful because trying deserves respect. Let's also explain perfectionism because it's a big concept. Perfectionism means you refuse to do something unless you can do it without any mistakes. For language learning, this is dangerous because you will never speak if you wait for perfection, since perfection only comes from practice.
I want to ask listeners a question right here. Do you wait until a sentence feels perfect in your mind before you say it out loud? Because a lot of learners do that. They try to prepare the entire sentence in their brain first, and while they're doing that, the other person has already moved on to another topic.
And that creates another awkward situation, because by the time the learner finally produces the sentence, the moment has passed and they feel embarrassed again. So they decide to avoid speaking next time, and the cycle continues. Fear, silence, regret, fear again.
Let's add some vocabulary here. Judge means to form a negative opinion about someone. For example, I don't want people to judge my accent. Pressure means a feeling that you must do something or you must do it well. Confidence means you believe you can do something successfully.
And here's a phrase to imitate that helps learners describe their experience. I feel pressure to sound perfect, and that makes speaking harder for me.
Another phrase they can use is, I understand English, but speaking is difficult because I need more confidence.
Before we close this segment, let's talk about why the idea of perfection in language learning is strange. When you speak your native language, you make mistakes all the time. You pause, you restart sentences, you forget names of objects, you say things that don't make sense for a second. But nobody cares, because communication is natural and messy.
And if communication is messy, then waiting for perfection before speaking is like waiting to feel completely healthy before going to the doctor. The logic doesn't work. You speak to get better, not because you are already perfect.
So here's a reflection question for listeners. When you avoid speaking English, is it because you are afraid of making mistakes or because you want to sound perfect?
Think about the difference, because understanding your motivation helps you change your habits later.
Let's talk about something that a lot of learners misunderstand. Many people think that confidence is something you build first, and then once you have confidence, you will finally start speaking. But the truth is often the opposite. Confidence doesn't arrive before you speak. It grows while you are speaking, during the messy parts, during the awkward pauses, during the moments when you search for a word and finally find it, or when you ask someone to repeat what they said and you actually understand them on the second try.
That's such an important shift because if you wait to speak until you feel confident, you can spend years trapped in silence. I've met learners who lived 10 years in an English-speaking country and still avoided conversations because they kept waiting for the moment where suddenly everything would click and they would sound fluent. But fluency doesn't appear like magic. It grows from thousands of imperfect interactions, and those interactions give you micro-victories that slowly build the confidence you're waiting for.
Let's explain micro-victory because it's a useful concept. Micro-victory means a small win that feels tiny but matters. For example, understanding a joke, ordering coffee without panic, asking for directions, or having a simple conversation with a stranger. These small wins stack up over time, and one day you wake up and realize you speak more than you thought you did.
I had a moment like that when I was learning Italian. I remember visiting Rome and trying to talk to a taxi driver. My Italian was pretty weak at the time, and I remember sitting in the back seat rehearsing sentences in my head like a nervous actor before going on stage. I wanted to ask him how long he had been driving taxis, but I wasn't sure about the grammar, so I kept arranging the sentence in my head again and again, and the longer I waited, the harder it became to say it.
I can picture you in the back seat doing that, and it's so relatable because learners do the same thing in their everyday lives. They prepare, they plan, they try to perfect the sentence in silence instead of just trying.
Exactly. And here's the twist. The driver suddenly asked me where I was from, and for some reason that gave me courage. So I decided to ask my question even though I wasn't ready. The sentence came out messy and not very elegant, but he understood me instantly and gave me a big friendly answer. And that moment gave me so much confidence because I realized I didn't need perfect grammar to connect with another human being.
And that's the emotional part of language learning that people don't talk about enough. Human connection is what gives speaking its soul. Nobody remembers the grammar rules they used in a conversation, but they remember the feeling of being understood and of understanding someone else.
Let's give learners a few vocabulary points here. Confident means you believe you can do something. Practice means repeating something to improve it. And progress means moving forward or getting better over time.
And here are some phrases learners can imitate. My confidence grows when I speak, even if I make mistakes. Or, I can express myself better when I stop worrying about perfection. Or another one, I speak to learn, not because I already know everything.
That last one hits hard because a lot of learners don't realize that speaking is part of the learning process, not the final result of learning. It's like thinking you must be good at swimming before you get in the water. The water is where you learn to swim. The conversation is where you learn to speak.
Let's talk about another common situation learners face. Sometimes people say, I understand English, but I can't speak. And this is incredibly common. The brain has two different skills: input, which is listening and reading, and output, which is speaking and writing. Many learners have strong input but weak output because they never practice speaking. They absorb English silently for years, like a sponge that never gets squeezed.
I love that comparison because squeezing the sponge is where the water comes out, and speaking is squeezing the sponge. You have all this vocabulary and grammar stored, but if you never speak, it stays locked in your head where no one can hear it. And guess what? The more you squeeze, the easier it becomes, and the more water comes out.
Let's ask listeners a personal question. How often do you actually speak English out loud during your week? Not listening to English, not reading it, but speaking it with your mouth.
A lot of learners will say almost never, and that's not a criticism, it's just the reality. But here's where the confidence myth shows up again. Learners think they must be ready to speak before they speak, but being ready is something you become through repetition. You gain courage from the act, not before the act.
And here's another emotional reality. When you speak more, you stop seeing your mistakes as failures and start seeing them as information. If you say something and someone doesn't understand you, that's useful information. If you mispronounce a word and someone corrects you, that's useful information. If you say a phrase and it works perfectly, that's also useful information.
Let's give learners a few helpful imitation phrases for asking for clarification, because this is a big part of real conversations. Could you repeat that, please? Or, what does that word mean? Or, can you say it more slowly?
These phrases help learners stay inside the conversation instead of running away from it. It gives them power, and power builds confidence.
One last reflection question for listeners before we end this segment. Do you wait to feel confident before speaking, or do you speak and let the confidence grow afterward?
Think about that honestly, because the answer can completely change your relationship with English. Earlier, we talked about confidence growing through speaking, and now I want to shift to something that changes everything once you feel it. It's when speaking stops being a test and starts becoming enjoyable. Because when you actually enjoy speaking English, fear doesn't disappear completely, but it becomes quieter and much less powerful.
Enjoyment changes the rules. When you're enjoying something, you stop checking yourself every second. You stop scanning for mistakes. You stop mentally grading your performance. You start focusing on the other person and on what they're saying, and suddenly the conversation feels like a shared moment instead of a stressful exam.
Let's give learners a simple example. Imagine someone learning English through online gaming. Gamers speak English all the time without thinking about grammar. They just talk. They joke. They ask for help. They argue about who stole the health pack. And because there's no pressure to sound academic, they enjoy the communication more, which makes them more confident without intentionally trying to be.
I had a student who joined a baking group on Discord, and she told me that she learned more English by talking about cakes and frosting than from any textbook she ever used. She said she stopped thinking of English as this big, difficult subject and started seeing it as a tool to talk about something she actually liked. And when that shift happened, her speaking improved faster because she looked forward to using English.
That's an important emotional distinction. When you look forward to something, your brain becomes relaxed and curious instead of defensive and scared. Curiosity is a better teacher than fear, always. And the funny thing is, enjoyment often arrives naturally when you're talking about something that matters to you or makes you happy.
Let's add a few phrases learners can imitate to make conversations feel smoother and friendlier. These are small phrases native speakers use to keep conversations alive. That's interesting. Really? Tell me more. Or, oh, I didn't know that. I never thought about it that way.
These small reactions make conversations feel human, and learners often forget that reacting is part of speaking too. Speaking isn't only delivering perfect sentences, it's also showing that you're present and engaged.
I want to give learners vocabulary for the emotional side. Enjoy means you feel pleasure or happiness from something. Relaxed means you are calm and not tense. Curious means you want to know more or learn more.
Here's a question for listeners. When was the last time you enjoyed speaking English even a little? Maybe you laughed or felt proud or noticed that someone understood you quickly.
And if you can't remember a moment like that, it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It might just mean you've been practicing in environments that focus on correctness instead of connection. And connection is where the joy lives.
So here's another phrase learners can use to make enjoyment a priority. I want to enjoy speaking English, not just pass a test.
And I love that because English becomes less of a subject and more of a vehicle for real life.
Now that we've talked about enjoyment, let's make it practical. Fear doesn't disappear because you listened to one podcast. It softens through small habits that give you repeated exposure to speaking without feeling overwhelmed. And the best part is, these habits don't require a teacher, a classroom, or a perfect situation. They just require a little consistency.
One habit I recommend often is what I call micro-conversations. A micro-conversation is a short, simple exchange you have with someone during your day. It could be ordering a drink, asking a quick question, saying thank you, or making a tiny comment. These moments are small, but the more you collect them, the more your brain starts saying, hey, we survived that. Maybe we can do more.
And I love that because the brain learns from repetition. The first time is scary. The 10th time is normal. Let's also talk about another habit that surprises people because it works so well. Talking to yourself. Many learners think talking to themselves is silly, but actors do it, presenters do it, language learners do it. You can describe what you're doing like, I'm making coffee, or I'm looking for my keys. Or you can reflect about your day, like, today I felt tired, but I finished my work. The point is getting your mouth used to producing English without pressure.
We should also mention shadowing. Shadowing means you listen to someone speak and repeat what they say at the same time or immediately after. You can shadow songs, dialogues in movies, YouTube videos, or podcasts like this one. It improves rhythm, pronunciation, and confidence because your mouth gets used to English patterns.
Let's give learners a few vocabulary points. Habit means a behavior you repeat often. Routine means something you do regularly, like every day or every week. Shadowing means repeating spoken language to practice sound and rhythm.
Another helpful habit is asking small questions during conversations. Many learners answer questions but never ask them. But asking questions keeps the conversation alive and increases speaking time. Here are some phrases learners can imitate. What about you? How do you feel about it? Can you explain that? Or, why do you think so?
These questions show interest and keep conversations from dying after one sentence. And we can make it even easier by giving learners what I call openers, which are short phrases that help you start speaking. For example, I was thinking about, recently I learned that, the other day I noticed.
Openers are powerful because they remove the pressure of creating a perfect sentence from nothing. You just add your idea after the opener and you're already speaking.
Before closing, let's ask listeners a quick Q&A moment. If you had to choose one speaking habit to try this week, which one would you pick? Micro conversations, shadowing, talking to yourself, or asking more questions?
Think about it honestly, and it's okay to choose the easiest one. Small steps create momentum.
We've talked about fear, pressure, confidence, enjoyment, and small habits. And now I want to close with something many learners never think about: identity. When you speak another language, even at a basic level, you are changing the way you exist in the world. You gain access to new people, new ideas, new jokes, new emotions, and new possibilities. And that makes language more than a school subject. It becomes part of who you are becoming.
And identity matters because it changes the question from, am I good enough at English, to, what can English allow me to do? That shift feels small, but it changes how you approach speaking. When English is a door instead of a test, you walk through it with curiosity instead of fear.
Earlier, we asked learners when they last enjoyed speaking English. Now I want to ask a different question. Do you allow yourself to enjoy being a beginner? Because the truth is, being a beginner in anything feels vulnerable at first. You don't have all the words yet, you don't sound like yourself yet, and you make mistakes that your native language would never let you make. But being a beginner also means you're expanding your life, and not everyone chooses to do that.
I once had a student who said speaking English made her feel like she had a second personality. She said her English personality was more curious and more playful, even though she didn't have a lot of vocabulary. And what I loved is that she didn't see that as a weakness. She saw it as a way to explore sides of herself that her native language kept too serious.
I've heard this from many learners. When you speak a new language, you gain a new voice, and even if that voice is simple, it's still yours. And the more you speak, the more that voice grows muscle and texture, until one day you sound like yourself in English too.
Before we close, let's review a few helpful vocabulary words we learned naturally today. Confident means you believe you can do something. Embarrassed means you feel uncomfortable because you think you did something wrong. Curious means you want to learn more or know more. Habit means something you do regularly.
And now a few imitation phrases to help listeners express their new mindset. I speak to connect, not to impress. Or, it's okay to be a beginner. Or, I can enjoy speaking even if I make mistakes.
If learners can take one thing from our conversation, I hope it's this. Speaking English isn't just about accuracy. It's about communication, curiosity, and connection. And when you focus on those three things, fear becomes much smaller.
And the best part is, you don't need permission to start enjoying English. You just need moments, small, messy, brave moments, where you open your mouth and let your English personality breathe a little. The more you do that, the more natural speaking becomes. And one day you look back and think, I speak English now, not perfectly, but confidently.
And confidence is what opens doors.
Before we say goodbye, I want to ask listeners one last question. What kind of English speaker do you want to become? And what small step can you take this week to move toward that version of yourself?
Sit with that question for a moment, because your answer matters.
And if you enjoyed practicing with us today, make sure you follow or subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. It helps more learners find conversations like this, and it tells us that these talks are valuable for you.
If you know someone who is learning English and feels shy or afraid to speak, share this episode with them. You might give them exactly the encouragement they've been secretly needing.
Thank you for spending a part of your day with us. Keep speaking, keep enjoying the language, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Take care, everyone.